They feared them, not because these men and women wielded armies, nor because they sought to overthrow kingdoms, but because they held something far more dangerous than swords or crowns, an inner fire. The mystics and so-called heretics of old whispered of a truth that did not need cathedrals, priests, or the approval of popes. Their authority came not from robes or ritual, but from direct communion with the divine. And that terrified the church more than anything else. Imagine a world where the veil between heaven and earth could be pierced not through the blessing of an institution, but through the stillness of your own soul. A world where truth was not dictated from pulpits, but revealed in silence, visions, and ecstatic experience. This was the path of the mystics, seekers who dared to bypass the gatekeepers of dogma. And for this, they were branded as heretics, rebels, even witches. But ask yourself, what is more dangerous to power, ignorance or awakening? A people lulled into obedience, or a people who realize they carry the spark of the divine within themselves? The mystics declared, openly or in secret, that the kingdom of God was not somewhere distant, controlled by clergy, but within. They spoke of a God who could be encountered in solitude, in nature, in the burning chambers of one's own heart. This message did not merely challenge doctrine, it threatened the very foundation upon which the Church's authority rested. Over the next few moments, we will descend into the hidden currents of history to uncover the real reason the Church feared mystics and heretics. We will explore why their voices were silenced, their writings burned, their names dragged into the mud of infamy. And more importantly, we will ask, were these rebels truly dangerous, or were they protecting truths humanity was never meant to forget? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover is not simply history, it is a mirror held up to our own time. The same struggle between inner truth and external authority still rages today, though cloaked in new forms. The mystics were not enemies of faith, they were guardians of a freedom deeper than religion itself. And it is time we remembered what they tried to teach us. To understand why mystics and heretics provoked such fear, we must step back into the heart of the Middle Ages, a time when faith was not simply personal belief, but the very framework of society. The Church was not just a religious institution, it was the pulse of politics, the keeper of knowledge, the judge of morality, and the gatekeeper of salvation. In this world, to question doctrine was to question reality itself. But even in this atmosphere of control, voices arose that refused to be silenced. Figures like Meister Eckhart, the Dominican mystic, spoke of a God beyond images, beyond form, a God discovered not in sermons but in silence. Marguerite Porete, a French beguine, declared in her Mirror of Simple Souls that the soul, when annihilated of ego, becomes one with divine love, a claim so radical that it led her to the pyre in 1310. And centuries before them, the Gnostics had already whispered of a secret knowledge, a gnosis, that revealed the divine spark trapped within every human being. What tied these voices together was not uniform doctrine, but a shared conviction that truth could be directly experienced. The mystics insisted that there is a dimension of reality that no priest could mediate, no sacrament could monopolize. Their philosophy was experiential, not dogmatic. They pointed toward the kingdom within, echoing the words attributed to Christ himself. The kingdom of God is within you. This was not merely spiritual poetry, it was subversive. If God could be touched in the stillness of the heart, what need was there for ecclesiastical authority? If divine wisdom could erupt in the visions of a solitary woman in the countryside, what claim did the hierarchies of Rome have over salvation? The Church feared mystics not because they lacked faith, but because their faith was too alive, too uncontainable. The label of heretic often followed. Heresy, from the Greek heresis, simply means to choose. But in the eyes of the Church, to choose differently was to threaten unity, and unity was power. A single soul stepping out of line risked inspiring others to seek their own path. The mystic's inner fire was contagious, and so the institution smothered it with threats, with excommunication, with fire. Yet beneath the fear, there lies a paradox. Many mystics were devout Christians, monks, or nuns who never abandoned their faith. They were not trying to destroy the Church, but to deepen it. Their heresy was often nothing more than daring to say aloud what others only felt in secret, that God is not distant but immediate, that heaven is not a faraway kingdom, but an inner state of consciousness. Philosophically, this represents the eternal clash between exoteric religion, the outer forms, rituals, and institutions, and esoteric spirituality, the inner direct experience of the sacred. Exoteric faith seeks order, hierarchy, and stability. Esoteric faith seeks freedom, transformation, and awakening. Both are necessary in their own way, but when one seeks to dominate the other, history erupts into persecution. And so, the mystics became dangerous, not because they preached rebellion in the streets, but because they revealed a truth too powerful for any one institution to contain. At its core, the conflict between the church and the mystics was not about theology, it was about power. Power over souls, power over truth, power over the invisible. When you control the narrative of salvation, you control the deepest fears and hopes of humanity. And for centuries, the church guarded this narrative with iron hands. Mystics disrupted this order because they did not simply believe in God, they claimed to know God. And there is a vast difference between belief and direct experience. Belief is something you inherit, something taught to you, passed down through authority. Experience is untamed. It comes to you in visions, in dreams, in silence so profound it shakes your very being. Experience cannot be legislated, taxed, or bound in ritual. Imagine a peasant who cannot read a single line of scripture, yet in a moment of ecstatic prayer feels the same divine presence that saints and prophets describe. What authority could possibly govern that? If the divine could erupt in the heart of anyone, anywhere, then the entire hierarchy, bishops, cardinals, even popes, suddenly looked less like sacred mediators and more like gatekeepers locking away a treasure they did not own. This is why mystics were often accused of spiritual pride. The idea that an ordinary man or woman could claim direct union with the divine was intolerable. The Church insisted that only through the sacraments, only through obedience to clergy, could one hope for salvation. The mystics said otherwise. They pointed inward. They declared that the human soul was a temple grander than any cathedral, and that silence could reveal mysteries grander than any sermon. But let us look deeper. The mystics were not simply rejecting authority. They were presenting an entirely different map of reality. Where the Church framed life as a preparation for heaven or hell, mystics spoke of awakening here and now. Heaven was not a distant promise, but a state of consciousness, accessible in this very breath. Hell was not merely a punishment, but the torment of separation from the divine essence already within us. This shift changes everything. For if heaven is within, no priest can sell indulgences, no pope can monopolize grace, no institution can control salvation. The mystics threaten the very economy of faith. Take, for example, Meister Eckhart's startling declaration, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." This is not pious humility, it is radical equality. It erases the distance between human and divine. It suggests that the soul is not a mere servant groveling before a distant master, but a reflection of the divine itself. Such words crack the very architecture of hierarchical religion, and it is no wonder Eckhart's teachings were placed under investigation. Even more threatening were the mystics who taught love over fear. Marguerite Porete's writings declared that the soul, once united with divine love, becomes free of law, free of fear, free even of the Church's authority. Love, she said, needs no external command. What ruler, spiritual or political, can tolerate a people no longer ruled by fear? Thus, mystics and so-called heretics were feared not because they led armed rebellions, but because they sparked an inner rebellion, a revolution of consciousness. They replaced obedience with freedom, guilt with love, fear with direct knowing. Their words spread like wildfire, often whispered in secret gatherings, copied in manuscripts, passed hand to hand beneath the eyes of inquisitors. And here lies the paradox. The more the Church tried to silence them, the more their mystique grew. Burning a book only made it legendary. Executing a mystic only turned them into a martyr. The attempt to crush the inner fire only proved how uncontrollable it truly was. The mystics revealed a secret that no institution could afford to acknowledge openly, that every human being is capable of direct communion with the divine. And once that truth is realized, the chains of control begin to fall away. Consider this. Every empire, every institution of control thrives on one principle: certainty. Certainty about who has power, certainty about what is true, certainty about what the future holds. The Church offered certainty. Obey and you will be saved. Disobey and you are damned. It was a simple equation, one that bound the soul in fear but also in order. Mystics shattered certainty. They spoke of paradoxes, mysteries, and truths that could not be captured in doctrine. Where priests sought to explain, mystics embraced the unexplainable. They used the language of fire and light, of dark nights of the soul, of divine union so intimate it could not be reduced to formulas. To the orderly mind of an institution, this was chaos. And yet, this chaos carried liberation. Think of the Sufi mystic Al-Hallaj, who proclaimed, "I am the truth," a phrase so audacious it was considered blasphemy. Yet beneath it was not arrogance, but realization, that the divine lives through us, that the eternal speaks in the human tongue. His death at the hands of religious authorities became a symbol of the danger mystics posed, not just to one religion, but to the idea of religious control itself. The Church and similar authorities across cultures painted mystics as dangerous precisely because they embodied freedom. A heretic was not always someone who hated God. Often it was someone who loved God too much, in a way that could not be regulated. Their intimacy with the divine dissolved the need for intermediaries. But let us pierce deeper. Why was this so terrifying? Because mystics challenged not just theology, but economics, politics, and psychology. Fear is a powerful currency. When people fear hell, they will obey. When they fear excommunication, they will conform. But when fear is replaced with direct experience of love, of union, of peace, they become untouchable. What army can conquer a soul that has already found eternity within? What ruler can threaten a heart that no longer fears death? This is why so many mystics wrote in veiled language, using poetry, allegory, and symbol. It was not simply to be beautiful, it was survival. Truth, when expressed directly, was too dangerous. But wrapped in metaphors of gardens, wine, lovers, and hidden light, their insights could slip past censors and awaken souls in secret. Of course, not all who were labeled heretics were mystics. Some were political dissidents, reformers, or simply those who stood in the wrong place at the wrong time. The term heretic became a weapon, a catch-all label for anyone who disturbed the fragile order. Yet notice the pattern. Those most fiercely targeted were often those who inspired devotion in others. The Church feared not the eccentric loner, but the charismatic figure whose inner fire lit torches in the hearts of thousands. The paradox is that many mystics remained loyal to their traditions. They prayed, they fasted, they lived in monasteries or convents. They were not outsiders trying to topple religion, but insiders seeking to deepen it. Their crime was that they reached a depth too profound to be owned by dogma. They reminded humanity that institutions may guide, but they cannot contain the infinite. And here lies the secret history. For every mystic condemned, countless others remained hidden, carrying their wisdom underground. Some teachings survived in fragments, some in whispers, some in texts buried until rediscovered centuries later. The mystic path never vanished. It only went underground, waiting for those willing to seek. In truth, the Church did not fear mystics because they were enemies of God. The Church feared them because they revealed that God was too vast, too intimate, too immediate to ever be controlled. It is easy to look back at the stories of mystics and heretics and see them as relics of a bygone age. But if we strip away the medieval robes, the monasteries, the flames of the Inquisition, we find something astonishing. The same forces that silenced mystics then are still alive today, in different guises. And the same courage that animated their voices is still available to each of us. At its heart, the mystic's message was simple. Truth is not something handed to you. It is something you awaken to. And here lies the first application, to step into your own direct experience. Too often, we inherit beliefs without ever questioning them. Not just religious beliefs, but cultural beliefs, social beliefs, even personal narratives about who we are and what we are worth. The mystic path begins by daring to ask, is this true for me? Do I know this in my bones, or have I merely accepted it because it was told to me? This is dangerous work, not because you risk excommunication in the modern world, but because questioning inherited beliefs shakes the ground you stand on. And yet, as the mystics knew, it is only in this trembling that we discover what is unshakable. The second application is silence. Mystics across traditions, from Christian contemplatives to Sufi poets, from Buddhist monks to Hindu sages, understood that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. It is the space where truth reveals itself without words. In a world drowning in noise, in endless commentary and opinion, silence is rebellion. A few minutes of genuine stillness each day is not just meditation. It is participation in the ancient lineage of those who refused to let external voices drown out the voice within. The third application is love, not sentimental, shallow love, but the radical love mystics spoke of, the kind that dissolves fear. Fear is the greatest tool of control in every age. Fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear of failure. The mystics replaced fear with love, and in doing so, became untouchable. Imagine living your life guided not by fear of what others will think, but by love for what feels true, noble, and alive within you. But perhaps the most profound application is freedom. The freedom the mystics embodied was not reckless defiance, it was inner freedom. You may live within a system, within rules, within society, but within yourself you can claim the sovereignty they died for. The courage to stand in your own truth, even when it contradicts the crowd, is the modern form of mystical rebellion. Ask yourself, where in my life have I silenced my own inner knowing for the sake of belonging? Where have I allowed fear to dictate choices that should have been guided by love? These are not abstract questions, they are the living edge of mysticism today. To walk the mystic path now does not require a monastery, nor visions, nor ecstatic trances. It requires something much simpler, but no less demanding, authenticity. To live as though your inner voice matters. To live as though truth is not out there, but in here. To live as though your soul is more than a passenger. It is the very flame of the divine, glowing quietly within. The mystics risked everything to embody this. They faced ridicule, imprisonment, even death. We may not face the stake or the inquisitor, but we do face a more subtle danger. The slow death of conformity, the quiet suffocation of our deepest knowing. The mystic path invites us to resist that death, to awaken fully, to risk the fire of authenticity in exchange for the ashes of a borrowed life. And so, the message of the mystics is not locked in dusty manuscripts or forgotten in hidden monasteries. It is alive, waiting for you. The question is not whether the church still fears mystics, but whether you are willing to become one. The story of the mystics and heretics is not merely a chapter of history, it is a mirror. It shows us the eternal tension between the inner and the outer, between living truth and borrowed truth, between the voice of the soul and the demands of authority. For centuries, the church feared mystics because they revealed a secret too dangerous to confine, that every human being has direct access to the divine. That God, or truth, or the ultimate, cannot be contained in buildings, books, or rituals alone, but is alive within the very fabric of our being. To acknowledge this was to loosen the church's grip on power. To silence it was to try, in vain, to silence the eternal. But history has a way of repeating itself. Even now, we live in systems that reward conformity and punish authenticity. We may no longer face inquisitors or pyres, but we face the quieter fires of social pressure, ridicule, and doubt. To follow your inner voice still carries risk. To live as a mystic, one who seeks truth directly, remains a revolutionary act. And yet, what is the alternative? To live forever asleep? To trade the vastness of your own soul for the comfort of borrowed certainty? The mystics remind us that life is too sacred, too fleeting, to be lived in chains. Their courage is an invitation, to step into your own knowing, to seek silence where the world demands noise, to love where the world demands fear, to awaken where the world demands sleep. Think of it. Marguerite Porete burned at the stake, yet her words still echo. Meister Eckhart condemned, yet his teachings are studied and cherished centuries later. Al-Hallaj executed, yet his cry of, "I am the truth," still reverberates across time. What does this teach us? That truth cannot be destroyed. That even in ashes, the flame endures. That what is born of direct experience belongs not to an age, but to eternity. And so, as you listen to these words now, the question arises, what will you do with this inheritance? Will you let it remain a story of others long gone, or will you claim it as your own? The mystic path is not about escaping the world. It is about transforming how you live within it. It is about seeing every moment as sacred, every breath as communion, every encounter as a mirror of the divine. It is about discovering that the temple is not a distant place, but the chamber of your own heart. The Church may have feared mystics and heretics, but you need not fear. For their path is not one of rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is a path of liberation, a path of becoming fully alive. So I leave you with this: do not wait for permission to awaken. Do not look outward for a gatekeeper when the gate has always been within. Walk as the mystics walked, not bound by fear, but lit by love. Let your life become the heresy of authenticity, the rebellion of truth, the quiet flame that no institution, no system, no power can ever extinguish. For the real reason the Church feared mystics and heretics is the same reason the world may fear you when you awaken. Because nothing is more powerful, more untamable, more radiant than a soul set on fire by its own truth.